On today's panel, we have Derek Mooney, Public Affairs Consultant and former Government Advisor, Councillor Jim O'Leary for the Gael representing the Dundrum area and Dún Laoghaire County Council, Councillor Emma Murphy of Fianna Fáil, who sits on South Dublin County Council and a Communications Director for Barry Andrews MEP, and Shane O'Brien, Sinn Féin, former Councillor in Dún Laoghaire County Council and now a Policy Officer for the party. Over the past number of weeks, councillors in both Dún Laoghaire County Council and South Dublin County Council have been working on their respective county plans. To give us an overview of Dún Laoghaire, we'll begin with Jim. So, Jim, what can you tell us? You didn't finish till midnight last night after a number of weeks.
Yeah, so we've actually just completed probably the most onerous part of the county development plan. We've had 2 weeks of meetings from 5 o'clock in the afternoon till 11, 12 at night. And the stage we've reached is we have, if you like, finalised the draft plan. So a draft plan would have been put out to the public there 6-8 months ago. The public would have been able to comment on it. We would have received in over 1,000 submissions. The management would have reviewed each one of those submissions. They would have synopsised it for us, and then we would have reviewed each one of them. And then based on that, and based on managers' recommendations, councillors would have been passing motions. So we passed about, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 250 motions over the last number of days. So we finalised that now. That's now, I suppose, I'm going to use the term, it's still a draft plan. It goes out to public consultation for another couple of months. People will be able to see what they think about it. It'll come back December or after Christmas. We'll finalise it between Christmas and March, and then it goes live in March.
Can you give us some details on what's in it? What's in it?
Well, I suppose purely from a Fine Gael perspective, we were emphasising three things. We were emphasising jobs, housing, and then trying to protect open space and the existing amenities of residents. Right. So with a number of key motions in terms of, for us, in the Dún Laoghaire area, Dún Laoghaire County Council, Sandyford Industrial Estate is the rates engine, if you like. And what we've witnessed there is there's an imbalance between the amount of commercial development and residential development that's going on that's actually putting at risk future commercial development. So we were looking to try and rebalance that. Probably the biggest initiative that we undertook, it was sponsored by myself and my colleague, Councillor Saul. We've rezoned 15 hectares of state-owned land to residential, with the intention that the LDA will consider it as part of their property portfolio. The Land
Development Agency, that's in Shangana, is that correct?
No.
Excuse me.
This is the Central Bank Mint.
In Dundrum.
In Dundrum, so okay. 15 hectares of land. We will hope then that it'll be used by the LDA for the provision of social and affordable housing, with an emphasis on affordable rental and affordable purchases. We've also rezoned about 2.5 hectares of that to put in again, the intention would be that on this side of the county, we don't have a community centre or sports centre of the same size as Loughlinstown, and it's a deficiency in this part of the county. So that gives us the opportunity to put something like that in place and the provision of additional sports fields. So that's probably the biggest initiative. But as a county development plan, it swings and roundabouts. We spent, amongst the most controversial debates were around roundabouts in Sallynoggin and Clyne.
But just briefly to go back to the proposed development in Dundrum, how realistic is that to go ahead, do you think?
Well, the very first step is the LDA are undertaking a full review of properties across the state. What's key is that these would have to be rezoned residential. That have to be, I suppose, that have to comply with proper planning. So this is a site that's within the built-up area. It's service land. It's close to amenities. It's close to employment. It's close to services. So you have to meet all those criteria. But the whole idea is that this is the first step in putting pressure on the minister to make sure that forms part of the portfolio. And again, it offers us the opportunity to address affordability in this county, because of all the counties in the country, as an example, a 3-bedroom, semi-detached house in Dún Laoghaire is twice the national average. And for a couple to afford one of those houses in this county, they need to have a joint income of 120,000. Now, that's just a function of the demand for people trying to live in this county, but it puts at risk our ability to provide homes for multitudes of people. People working in the guards, nurses, teachers, people working in the private sector, in the back offices of the large firms that are going into the Centre for Business Park. So we have an obligation to try and make sure that we can house all cohorts, not just the wealthy.
Just as a sidebar, Jim, is there some proposal there to get rid of the roundabouts in the Glenageary-Salanoggin area?
Yeah. So that again, I mean, that's where politics gets a bit silly. You have local politicians whipping up concerns that aren't a concern. Trying to worry people into the idea that the roundabouts are going to be taken away when there are no such plans. And then they look for SLOs.
SLOs now, or which SLOs?
Specific local objectives. You put in an SLO onto the roundabout saying we need to retain this roundabout because it's great for traffic. These roundabouts were so important to some of the locals. I was surprised that they weren't trying to put them into the record of protected structures, But these are things that we should really be leaving to experts like traffic engineers. And we've seen on this side of the county when we've removed roundabouts, it's done with a significant amount of consultation. It actually is there to improve traffic flow. It's acknowledged roundabouts work up to a certain threshold, and then after that you have to move. But as a dynamic, you have a situation here where we're looking to rezone 15 hectares. It goes through without much controversy. But trying to retain a roundabout that wasn't even being challenged creates all the heat.
Okay, all right. So that's to sum up the and so where does it go? Just from the listener's point of view, where does it go from here?
It'll go back out onto public consultation.
When is that? When will that be?
I'm going to say it'll have to go out in the next 3 weeks. I'm assuming I'm picking that figure from the top of my head, but that type of a time frame, and then people will get to comment on it again. And councillors will have to make a final decision within that window, and then it's locked down. And that's our development plan from 2022 to 2028.
But to sum up then, it's the community developments and the area up and around Dundrum there with the old mint are probably the highlighted features of it. Would that be
that's probably the biggest initiative. But other things we were very conscious of trying to protect. So we would have downzoned some land. We would put extra protections around open space. We would look to put in safeguards when it came to separation distances between existing homes and new developments.
Right.
For my own part, then I was very key that we, secure a site for a community centre, a cultural community civic centre in Dundrum, with a civic square or a public plaza. So
this is to do with the development that Hammerson are talking about, I take it.
Well, it's on the same site. I'll put it that way. So there will be a tension between what they're and they get to put their planning permission in before this plan is finalised, which is a pity, before the LAP is finalised.
Right.
And, that's unfortunate. Yeah. And maybe it's beyond unfortunate, but we'll see. Okay. We have to see what's the nature of their planning application.
Emma, South Dublin County Council, you've concluded your talks as well, I believe.
Yeah, we're kind of gone just a little bit of a stage further, I suppose. We concluded. I think we had 1,100 motions. So Jim, you got away lightly. We were burning the candle for a few nights. Believe me. So no, we're actually out at the kind of second public consultation now. So it'll come back to us in the early new year for final consultation with councillors. But I suppose the contentious components from our perspective were that we rezoned very little, like very, very, very little. But there was a huge amount of submissions from private developers, etc., to requests for rezoning. And there was little to none. There's a huge proposal in Kingswood that was it turned out, and there was a good few north of the Nace Road, as we call it, dividing the county kind of in two in that sense. But I suppose from my perspective, I had a few good small personal wins, I think, a few small good personal wins. Managed to secure an agreement for the provision of a swimming pool somewhere in the Firhouse, Knockline, Rathfarnham area. It's kind of those two local electoral areas are the two local electoral areas in the county that don't have a swimming pool. My own area that I grew up in Ballyboden would be very underserviced in terms of amenities, and I managed to secure again the provision of a sports pavilion within the Ballyboden area to service the the clubs that are existing there, very much community kind of colloquial kind of one in that sense, and a couple of others in relation to. There was one in particular that I backed, the motion was mine and got, unanimous support was, for the provision kind of a recreation and glamping site from a private entity up in the base of the Dublin Mountains there on the Ballycullen end. So, it's really interesting, Brian. I think we finished our county development plan on a Thursday night. We elected the mayor the following morning. And that's kind of... it was really interesting. The day after that was passed, there was 4 applications for SHDs, literally within probably 3. The strategic housing doing,
yes, yeah.
Within 2 kilometres of each other. 3 of them have been passed. One of them is still kind of is still going through the process with on board Planala. But when I was kind of looking at a lot of the arguments against rezoning were, this public, private land and public land and housing and so on and so forth. And it just meant that the kind of SHD model just made a mockery of any kind of votes down that were made by councillors.
Yeah. Well, that is ending in February anyway, isn't it, Emma?
Yeah, it's ending in February, but it's really interesting to see the amount.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see the amount of kind of gone in as well. But I suppose we really kind of had a kind of a community focus, I suppose, with regard to the county development plan, looking at kind of areas that need to be more serviced, that are kind of underserviced. Mm-hmm. And it was a tough process. It is a tough process, and it's getting tougher. So I'm looking forward to another few long nights now at the turn of the year, to get it through and get it over the line. Okay. But we're going into budget season as well, so it's always an interesting time between October and February in county development plan years. So it's an interesting one.
Very good, Shane. Bring you in. What are your thoughts on what are you hearing from the former council you used to sit on in terms of the county plan?
Yeah, no, listen, I don't envy Jim in terms of the hours that you have to put in. That's one thing I don't miss. But the actual process itself, I found, as a first-time councillor, was actually quite exciting. And in terms of knowledge building right across the county, you really do learn a lot about the ins and outs of, right down to the minutiae of
planning.
Planning. Yeah, no, it is. It's an excellent process. And I was actually chair of the Strategic Policy Committee for Planning in and around at the time of the last county development plan. So it was something I had a kind of personal interest in. And, I might have had about 60, 70 personal motions in at the last time. I've been watching a little bit of Jim and other councillors in action over the last, rounds of the process. And it's obviously quite an elongated process. And I think there's been some interesting debates. There's ones which sites that would have been key sites in I suppose, from a housing development perspective, that I would have an interest in. The Mint, the former Mint site, obviously being a major one. I know previously there were submissions from the Department of Housing in and around at the last county development plan, which were citing security risks of why it couldn't be developed in a manner that myself and others wished to see it developed in. Mm-hmm. I know, and Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a number of motions, whether on the site in the Mint, about developing it for social and affordable purposes. And I think yourself were looking to develop it for mainly affordable purposes. So I do think, any public land, it should be developed for social and affordable purchase rent.
I think Dundrum now is one of the most expensive counties in from the point of view of housing.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important that the last vestiges of public land and key sites such as the Mint are developed, in accordance with, I suppose, the Shangana Urban Village kind of model in mind. Obviously a model that, myself and other former councillors developed and brought senior management and councillors on board. And it's just important that we're not, putting private for-profit housing on sites such as this. I think, Jim said it there, the average house price is forcing many first-time buyers, such as myself and many others in my generation and younger, out of the county. Rents are continuing to skyrocket. Obviously, the budget that's just gone by has done very little in terms of alleviating.
I don't want to get into that now. Yeah.
So, but that's what I think is really important. And then obviously Mount Down think that was a key site. It's right throughout the last council and continues to be. The other thing, and I actually want to just back Jim on this in a sense, this is how the county's development plan sometimes be misused. Issue of roundabouts.
Yeah.
Seeing the bearing its head again around Glenageary.
I want to bring Derek in because I just want to bring before we finish with this. Derek, you welcome the end of the strategic housing developments, do you? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and unfortunately, it's sad to see some of them trying to get in under the wire, as Emma's outlined there. That this last dash. However, the problem is when you do set an end date for these things, that's exactly what happens. Is anyone who has plans in the pipeline start charging ahead with them. Yeah. I think just as I make a broad point, which is first of all, this is the meat and potatoes of local government. This is what local politics is about. This is what council. It is hard work. It's tedious work, and it's unglorious work at a time. But what comes out of it is what decides our urban architecture, what decides what's around us. It decides the areas we live in, what they're going to look like for the next 10, 15 years. And there's particularly around South County Dublin and Dundee right down, but I mean South County Dublin, in the old geographic sense of it, is there is scope there for huge development. And when I say huge development, exciting development, rather than just more concrete pillars, etc. That in terms of the demand for people to live there, particularly young people to live there, is huge. And if the emphasis isn't on housing every single time, then these things are going nowhere. And therefore, the development that the Mint is to be welcomed. And it has to be social and affordable, because I think affordable is becoming even a bigger problem, and that's where the emphasis needs to be placed right across it. But Dublin risks dying on its feet if people cannot continue to live in Dublin. Sure. And there are so many issues around Dublin. I would suggest, having lived in Dublin City Council area for most of my life and having run for the thing a couple of times, you come out to Dundee right down, which you thought was just kind of, these cute little pretendy councils out of the fringes. And you realise, hang a second, the structures are better out here. The whole thing, the infrastructure is far, far better than Dublin City Council. And if you look at how the lockdown was handled, if you look at how the pandemic was handled, O'Leary right down was an example of how you actually think creatively. And Dublin was again where you sit and you react, you wait ages and ages and ages until you react. And then you find that the whole city centre, once you take the workers out of the city centre, very few people are living in the city centre. Okay. And the city centre becomes a ghost town. Okay. And then it develops from the ghost town to becoming almost feral in some parts. Okay. So I think there's a huge fear what's come out of the last while. Okay. And I think Dublin City Council has a very, very long way to catch up.
And that was Derek Mooney, Public Affairs Consultant, former Government Advisor, Councillor Jim O'Leary of Gael, Councillor Emma Murphy of Fianna Fáil, and Shane O'Brien, Sinn Féin, former Councillor in O'Leary, Rathdown County Council, and now Policy Officer for the party. Coming up next, Jim O'Leary on the Hammerson proposal for Dundrum Village.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
Welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on social media at iProperty Radio or email hello@ipropertyradio.com. Hammerson, the owners of the Dundrum Town Centre, has announced that it plans to build apartments in Dundrum. It is anticipated the construction proposal will be applied for under the Strategic Housing Development for planning permission, which expires in February. To discuss this latest housing development for Dundrum, on the line is Councillor Jim O'Leary, Fine Gael, and represents the Dundrum area. So, Jim, I'll just ask you for your reaction to this news that came in last week, before the weekend.
Well, I suppose my immediate reaction is when you see a number of 890 apartments or thereabouts, that's a huge number. So there's an element of shock, if you like. But at the same time, I think we need to recognise the Achilles heel of this economy and the society at the moment is we do have a housing problem. So in that sense, the idea that finally something has been done on this side is positive. Now, whether we don't know anything about the design, we don't know anything about the heights involved or the densities or anything like that. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so my immediate reaction is 900 just seems a very high number. But at the same time, think about it. If you are a young family or if you are a young couple, is there a nicer place to live maybe than Dundrum? It's an ideal site. So it is about getting the balance right, I think, though.
So do you have any idea then in terms of sort of land accumulation? Or, will there be houses? Will the main street in Dundrum be affected by any demolition, for instance?
Well, you see, this is what we don't know. And I mean, some of the concerns I would have is that we're going through our county development plan. We haven't finalised that yet. And what we're trying to do is protect feel like the streetscape and the character of the main street, so that whatever is being built, that the old Victorian streetscape is protected and incorporated into it. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we have a proper site for a community and cultural centre, and that we have a civic square, a civic plaza for people. So all of these things are being finalised at the moment. And so this planning permission or this planning application is kind of getting in ahead of us being able to finalise that. The other concern I would have is that, and again, we don't know because we don't have the details of it, is the whole site just going to be given over to residential, which if it is, would be retrograde. Because what we're hoping there is that we would have hoped that there would still be a certain amount of retail, but that there would be other
community type of...
There could be a hotel, that there could be entertainment, there could be leisure opportunities, that there could be offices. I mean, the whole idea here is that if people can live close to where they're working, that's all the better, that you get a compact, 15-minute city. So there's an awful lot we don't know. All we know is that they're talking with the board, then they'll be talking with Dún Laoghaire for close to 900 apartments and a creche. That's all we know. But if that's all it amounts to, something would be...
Jim, forgive my naivety here, but let me understand this a little bit better. The application is going under the strategic housing development, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But surely there should be firm plans there for that to go ahead under the development plan, and that goes from Bord Pleanála, correct?
At the moment, you see at the moment, this is just a consultation process.
Oh.
So what will happen is they're having discussions with Bord Pleanála, then there will be a tripartite process of them discussing plans with Bord Pleanála and Dún Laoghaire. And based on the feedback they get from the two planning authorities, they will then lodge a very detailed planning application, which will actually address the issues that have been raised explicitly by Bord Pleanála. They will have to explain how the issues that Bord Pleanála raised, they have addressed in their submission.
So really,
the difficulty is we don't know what that is yet. The only people who know are Bord Pleanála.
So we're in the very early stages then of it, obviously, at this point.
But they will, and as I understand it, based on what's on Bord Pleanála website, in early December, Bord Pleanála will either give the green light and tell them, yes, you've done enough work here, we understand this enough, make a submission, and they will make that submission under the SHD process. And the idea is that the larger developers are having to get these submissions in before the end date of February.
Yeah, I see. There are other developments trying to get through as well. I can see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's new planning legislation coming through, and they have a certain, with change comes a level of uncertainty. So from a developer's perspective, they know the way the SHD process works. It's been there for 3 or 4 years. Let's see what we can get done through that.
And have you had any reaction from the executive within Dún Laoghaire as Down County Council at this point in time as to how they're thinking about it?
In fairness, at this moment in time, we're caught up in the county development plan, and we've had 3 late night meetings last week. We have scheduled for 4 this week. So there hasn't been an opportunity really to discuss this with them, I suppose. I haven't talked to them about it. What I'm more concerned about is making sure that, and we're getting to this part of the plan now, is that as we plan for Dundrum, that we incorporate the things that I think will make Dundrum an excellent place to live in or around. And that's about being able to provide a site for a new community and cultural and civic centre, being able to provide a site for a new civic square and plaza, and making sure that any development that happens in the Dundrum area, incorporates things beyond just residential, beyond just retail.
But how realistic is that, Jim?
Well, this is the danger now, I suppose. I mean, because this is getting in before we finalise both our local area plan and our county development plan, they're getting in ahead of some of the new initiatives that we have in the county development plan. The only thing I would say is that whatever is being built, they do have to respect the existing streetscape. That's an existing specific local objective, and that's important. And so that's a small thing. But again, as well, I would have hoped that there would have been more space given over to leisure activities, a nightclub, offices, creches, remote working hubs, opportunities like that. So we'll see. We won't know until the actual plan lands and it's in the public domain what's been offered. And you know, as I said, my initial reaction, 900 apartments seems really, really high. But at the same time, you know, Dundrum is an ideal location. The design could be excellent and there could still be enough land left over.
Yeah, but again, you've no idea yourself of whether they're one bed, 2 bed studios or what type of makeup the actual block will be.
None. And that's the disadvantage we're at this moment. We don't know whether they'll be built to rent or they'll be under the normal planning approach. I would hope, and all I can say is hope, like most people in the area, that they're not built to rent. I would hope that while there will be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, that there are sufficient 3 bedroom apartments as well for families, because what we've identified is that as the population is growing, there is a greater need now for 3 bedroom apartments for families. We need to start building proper family apartments in this county. In the past, the idea was that the apartments would be used by couples, single people, but now the housing stock that we have, the 3 and 4 bedroom houses that we have, there isn't sufficient numbers there to meet the demand for developing families. So, you know, we're in the dark here. All we know for definite is that a final application in all likelihood will go in December, that the discussions they're having with Embrough is for around 900 apartments. We don't know the height, we don't know the density, we don't know how many blocks there'll be, we don't know the precise locations, and we don't know whether there's enough land left over for other initiatives.
Okay, so that goes to Embrough by the end of December. What's the process after that?
Well, what will happen after that then? So if it goes to Embrough in December, off the top of my head now, it's there's set goals in terms of or set timeframes, but one of the processes is the plans will be explained to local councillors. We will get the opportunity to outline our concerns. Okay. And we'll do that in an area committee.
But that's unique then, isn't it, Jim? I mean, I thought that Embrough was took the decision themselves.
Well, yeah, ultimately, with all of these things, the board is the final arbiter. It takes the positions. But the SHD has been a very useful process in allowing councillors greater insight into the plan. So our planners will explain the application to us. Then we will make our views known on that application, as we have done on many other SHD applications. In addition to that, the O'Leary's planners also assess the plan and also come to a conclusion as to whether they would grant permission or not grant permission for it. And if they wouldn't grant permission, and the board is of a mind to grant permission, they will outline the type of changes they would recommend to the board. And this forms a document that's called the Chief Executive's Report, which the board inspector then has to have regard to. So while the decision is no longer with the council does have a role in giving its opinion, both the elected members and the planners.
But that all has to be in by February of next year, isn't that correct?
The application has to be in by February next year, but I would imagine that if the application goes in, let's say the application goes in December, let me just see if I can get some sense of timelines. Then the public will be given, I think it's 6 weeks to actually put in their views on it.
Yeah.
You have to make an online submission, and then in addition to that, I think that the board then has about another 2 months to make a decision on it.
No, the reason I'm bringing up February is because that's when the scheme expires.
Yeah, but I think the idea is that anything that gets into the system before February will go through that until the end. It looks like that it may well be they will get confirmation from Embrough in early December as to whether the board thinks that the planning application that they've discussed with the board is deemed credible enough such that you can apply under the SHD. So you actually have to have permission to apply under the SHD approach. So they need permission from Embrough first to actually apply under the SHD approach. And that's what they're waiting on.
Sure.
So let's say they get permission in December. It may well be they'll wait until January with Christmas coming up before they actually launch their actual plans.
Well, you brought a lot of clarity to this particular story about the apartment development in Dundrum anyway. So for now, Councillor Jim O'Leary, Fine Gael, representing the Dundrum area. Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks, Brian.
93.9 Dublin South FM.
And welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. We're now joined by Taylor Odegaard, CEO of Navigator CRE, and his colleague, Kevin Stoffman, Chief Operations Officer. Taylor and Kevin, you're very welcome to iProperty Radio today. Navigator CRE, talk to us and tell us about that.
Certainly. So we are a data analytics platform specifically focused on data visualization and enablement for commercial real estate owner operators and occupiers across the globe. Our platform is designed to aggregate all of the data and data sources and disparate data sources together into one pane of glass and ultimately drive efficiency, weaponizing your data, turning it into intellectual currency, and then we teach you how to spend it as an operator.
Weaponizing data, that sounds dangerous.
and it should be. I think the focus that we have is giving people the ability to utilize that data in a whole new way. And some of the incredible statistics we found is roughly 78% of all data collected at the property level is never used for analytics or decision making.
I think even people in the industry wouldn't be surprised to hear that figure. What I'd love to see is how that's changed, not necessarily as a result of COVID, but certainly we know that COVID has accelerated this trend that was already in play. So in terms of the company, how long has the company been in existence?
So we founded Navigator in 2015. I wrote the original code base in 2008 when I was in college studying real estate finance and development in Los Angeles, and used it in my commercial real estate career, which was about 14 years and spanned many different large brokerage firms from Colliers International to Jones Lang LaSalle to CBRE, from the research side all the way through to capital markets. And Navigator was a software tool that I built to try to create an acceleration in data visualization and analytics. And in 2015 to 2017 is where we decided to really turn this sandbox that I had built into a real enterprise-grade platform, raised our initial round of capital from local high net worth individuals in the Pacific Northwest near Seattle. And from there started to bring Navigator to the enterprise market. And in 2018 and 2019, we started to really find product market fit in the owner-operator asset management world, as well as the global occupier services world. And in 2019 to 2020, we really separated ourselves as an industry leader in data visualization and analytics for commercial real estate.
It's interesting that you were introduced to this industry through your education back in 2008. That's not a long time ago, and that was also right at the kind of not the pinnacle, but we knew we were facing into a crash, although the severity obviously wasn't too clear. Learning this industry in 2008, the technology for other industries was well established. In terms of training, what level of training, as in, and what I'm trying to get at is how much introduction to technology did you get through your real estate training?
Quite a bit. I think it was a mix. I grew up in the backyard of Microsoft, and many of my friends started software companies and cloud storage companies in high school and in college. And so I'd always been a technologist from that standpoint. And what happened is my real estate education came together, and I really became kind of a hybrid of bringing technology and real estate together and realizing that, myself, as well as the colleagues that I brought into Navigator, all had a very unique persona of wanting to bring technology to an industry that was fairly provincial. And we had seen what had happened in healthcare tech and fintech and insurtech in the 2000s and in late 2000s. And commercial real estate was definitely the laggard of having core enterprise grade technology to serve the operators. And that's ultimately where I met Kevin when he was running Deloitte's global real estate practice, and ultimately brought him in to be a full Kool-Aid drinker of Navigator as my COO.
I'm smiling because I was one of those provincial people initially. Back in 2008, I was still in grad school, and I was not a believer that tech was actually going to make real estate better. I thought this is a business driven by more art than science, right? Creating experiences where we live, work, and play, and building financial models to support it. And it's clear now, right, 13 years later, that not only have I been proven wrong, but I'm a full Kool-Aid drinker of the power of technology in real estate.
You know, that's really interesting. I love hearing about that, because actually there were still pockets of resistance. And I think it's really interesting. You said you doubted whether technology would make it better, because most people doubt whether the industry would have embraced technology the way they did. Whereas for you, the doubt was, would it make it better? And by the way, you know, I actually still speak to people who believe that elements of the industry have been influenced, but not necessarily improved by technology. I'm not of that school of thought, but I'm always interested to hear when people are, because look, we say a lot that this is a people-driven business, and that's true. But the reality is the quality of the decisions we make are so much better when we rely on data. And I mean, you referred to previously believing real estate was a bit of an art rather than a science. Frankly, up until 15 years ago in Ireland, property valuations was an art rather than a science. We didn't even have a register of property values. And I can remember, 15 years ago, speaking to particularly US buyers coming into Ireland, and they would, when they were looking at properties, they would ask for the comps, and Irish estate agents would say, what do you mean? It didn't exist. It's just, it wasn't how we operated at any level. So actually, in a way, the industry has transformed massively in 15 years. But I think the last 18 months or 20 months have been the most interesting. So maybe talk us through how your clients have reacted or responded, and not necessarily just your clients, but actually your target clients as well over the past 18 months.
Certainly. I think one of the things we really saw is, Navigator as a platform is again, designed for data enlightenment. It's designed to bring all the data sources you have together and really turn those into actionable insights. And while call it pre-COVID, a lot of companies were on a tear. They were acquiring properties globally, entire portfolios and funds. And then ultimately, when COVID hit, the decision making changed and shifted from net acquisition of the portfolio, and now it was starting to understand the portfolio's current DNA. How is it made up? Who are my tenants? Where are they located? Are they operating? Do they have money? Are they heavy on retail? Are you heavy in office? Are people coming back to the office? And so what we saw, a lot of our clients, because they already had all of the data inside of Navigator, or even our new clients we were pursuing, they had all of this data. They weren't really sure how to weaponize it again, to use it for decision making. And so we were able to very quickly add new productization into Navigator and new insights that were focused around rent abatement and collections and aged receivables by day, and helping our clients really understand who's paying rent, who's in the office, who's falling behind, who's giving back space. So ultimately, still the power of data was there. It was intrinsic into the portfolio, but they never used it in a way that helped them have insights into where do we mitigate risk. And that's ultimately where we saw a huge shift. And especially during COVID, finance FP&A teams couldn't just walk down the hall to portfolio management or debt or asset management. They were disparate, they were spread out. And so needing a centralized platform where they could integrate and even on Zoom, have collaborative conversations about, okay, where we're going, what portfolio assets are performing well, what aren't, what do we do? How do we provide rent relief to our customers, or blend and extend them to give them some relief and keep them in the building? And so ultimately, we saw our clients really shift to a very data-driven approach versus before. It's kind of easy to throw at a dartboard when it's a huge bullseye. That bullseye got really, really small during COVID, and they had to use data and trajectory and trigonometry to get to successful wins.
Right, but one of the things that we are at pains to point out here is that the quality of the insights coming out is massively dependent on the quality of information going in. So how does your technology work? Given that it has to do so much more than deliver insights, it really is about a culture change that is still only happening now.
Yeah, certainly. I think what it comes down to too is oftentimes our clients and even clients we're starting to work with took a data warehousing approach. They needed to get all their data in one place, but ironically enough, building a data warehouse for the operational team, meaning the portfolio managers, the actual market officers, that is foreign language to them. That doesn't mean anything to them. So adding the layer that Navigator does, even in the data governance process and the lead up to kind of production environment, is super important, because they're able to see all of the holes in their data day one versus 6 months down the line or 18 months down the line. We give them kind of this day one atmosphere of them being able to say, oh, we're missing buildings, we're missing leases, we're missing general ledger statements and credits and charges. And so bringing in data visualization early on in the experience alongside a data warehousing project or a data governance project actually gives the operators who are not technologists and not data scientists the ability to see things in layman's terms, very understandable. We call them kind of data meatballs, very easy to eat, very simply seasoned. They can see, okay, I know that that's not right, or I know this is right. And it allows them to take action so that as they're running towards a deployment of a software solution, they know that when they hit day one, when they're utilizing this tool, that it's been breathed into by the business, not just the data and IT team. So they are ultimately getting a platform you can utilize day one to make decisions and make them with confidence.
The only thing I would add there, just to give you an example in practice, right? Since you're in Ireland, right? Extremely popular trend lately for technology companies and some pharmaceutical companies to do business, right? In Ireland, and they've taken down office space, right? To house some employees there. Well, finding the space is its own set of data. If you own the building, you need to be tracking what's vacant, what's being toured face to face, what's being toured online virtually. If the person touring the space is a tenant within your portfolio in other places, what they're paying, what industry they come from, and what's the average industry rent for those leases, what type of capital project work might need to happen to the suite before it's ready for the tenant to move in, and then what type of credit history they have overall. All of that information typically was stored in a bunch of different places. And so leasing wasn't talking to accounting, wasn't talking to acquisitions, wasn't talking to construction and development. Now, all of a sudden, those people all have the same set of information. So you can now more easily get approvals for remodeling. You can have a more educated discussion for lease renewals and negotiations, and a more positive tenant experiential relationship. That's the power of this centralizing and visualizing of data.
And a central platform makes absolute sense, but the reality is PropTech has been on the rise over the past 5 or 6 years. So I would imagine that you're not coming into portfolios that don't have any technology. You're coming into ones that will have invested in bits and pieces. So how do you work with those, whether to integrate other solutions, or actually do you essentially just come in and that technology spend has to be respent effectively?
Yeah, the whole purpose of our platform, we call ourselves Switzerland, right? Because we will literally integrate, ingest, audit, and work with anyone and anything. And the only reason we can do that is because we do not anonymize, share, or sell any data. Clients' data is their own data. The dashboards are their own dashboards. The functionality is their own functionality. That's how we can work with all these companies. So we then begin integrating information from all these platforms that already exist, right? That's accounting systems, leasing systems, CRMs, Excel spreadsheets, third-party public data sources. And the power of that is it becomes less of a SaaS model, even though that's how we price. It's more of a consultative model. So we're bringing real estate subject matter expertise to work with the business. The business says, here's what we want to see. And then we work backwards. Okay, what data is going to make that possible? Now let's bring in IT and work with them.
When we hear consultative, I always think it's kind of the opposite of scalable. So how does that tally, or is this kind of the initial onboarding?
Yeah, it's the initial, but most importantly, everything that exists inside of our platform exists because our clients recommended it. So we're basically crowdsourcing the best information, ideas, and use cases from all of our clients. Obviously, you've seen them on our website, right? Blackstone, Starwood Capital, Newmark, Brandywine, et cetera. They bring a lot of interesting ideas because they're living this day-to-day on the ground. And what that ends up building is a standard toolkit that we start with each net new client. So that speeds deployment, it speeds, I'll call it, action to insights. We trademarked the term return on speed, actually trademarked it because we think speed to knowledge is the real power here.
Okay. Speed is never something I associate with the real estate industry. I mean, I'm to start getting a data-driven approach and actionable insights. Speed almost seems like a step too far at this stage. But talk to me about the evolution of the company and the expansion. So you've recently expanded into the UK market. Given your US base, was the UK the next logical step, or what's the strategy behind that?
Yeah, we a lot of our clients that are headquartered in the US have thought it's time for us to expand organically. And so they have assets in these markets and regions. And we thought it best to grow alongside them and with them. We also, like the fact that there's very limited, if any, language barrier moving into the UK and Western Europe. And time zone coverage is also fairly easy right now. In fact, we just opened up our London office and hired our first UK employee under its own entity. And I think we're just excited because even though people like to say that real estate is provincial, I really do think that there's a lot of trends in the UK and greater Europe where they're ahead of the US in the way they think about the way people interact with real estate.
Yeah, it's amazing. Real estate may be provincial, but money isn't. The money is definitely global at the moment. So in terms of your plans, I mean, look, congratulations on opening the London office. That's fantastic. It's another port of call now on my next trip to London. I look forward to visiting. But what are the expansion plans into, say, other European markets? Is the EU an important destination for you?
I think it will be. I think ultimately, in our growth plan in the US, as Kevin mentioned, a lot of our clients are global. They are not just in the US. They have global portfolios and portfolio companies. And so we really get drawn into other regions. And so while the US was, domestically our focus, we have offices in Seattle, Los Angeles, Dallas, and now London, progressing further across, the UK and ultimately Europe are definitely on our site plans, as well as into APAC. So we have opportunities already starting to blossom in Singapore and Tokyo and China for large real estate companies as well. But I think, as Kevin mentioned, moving into the UK was a nice, good step for us to jump across the pond. We already have, through our relationships with some of our clients, thousands of buildings that we have on our platform in Western Europe, as well as companies on the occupier side across Scandinavia and Western Europe already using Navigator. So for us, it was a natural progression, and ultimately we like to be using our own Navigator term. We like to be led by our customers.
Yeah, no, and actually that's ideal. I mean, one of the things we've seen across our PropTech startups in Ireland is that most of them who actually started in Ireland initially started exporting alongside one of their customers. So when they expanded into new markets, it was generally with a client in mind, and it's a good, safe way to get local market knowledge, regional knowledge, and expertise. It's kind of a safe way to enter a new market. In terms of innovation, Taylor, I'm very aware that you came into studying real estate with a technologist approach, which is very unusual. Fast forward now, 12, 13 years, how are you finding the approach not just to innovation? I like to try separate technology from innovation, because actually I do think that this is an industry that has always been quite good at innovation, particularly if we look at the construction side. But I think maybe it's not seen because innovation was really the differentiator between the best in class and the rest. So it was never something, there was never a collaborative culture. That was the competitive advantage, whereas technology is different. It's making innovation a bit more ubiquitous, which is great. But how are you finding the more traditional players, particularly the larger ones, where when you talk about digitizing their portfolio, it's a huge ask? How are you finding the attitudes towards innovation shifting?
I think ultimately it's that enlightenment that data is currency, and that it is something to be powerful. And I think ultimately our design and approach was to bring a platform to the market globally that is designed for that enlightenment. And I would say over the last 10 years, to actually call it 15 years, the innovation in technology has been very ad hoc. It's been company to company building their own in-house solutions for their own competitive advantage that they thought was going to drive the market. And really it didn't. A lot of large firms call themselves technology first. They're not really technology first because they're building in a vacuum. They're building in a cul-de-sac. They're not building for innovation and scale. And our approach is essentially an all tides rise approach. Every boat gets to rise with us. So bringing in best practices across an industry, that's where true industry-wide innovation happens, where everyone gets better as a whole versus one group getting better in a vacuum and using that as a competitive advantage to actually suppress others and growing. And I think that that's something that we saw again in health tech and insurtech and fintech over the last 15 years, is they all started to collaborate and integrate and cross over and integrate platforms together. Even simple tools like Clover and Stripe integrating into their banking softwares and Zelle. You're starting to see, all of these ad hoc bespoke solutions becoming platforms. And then you get not just the businesses, but also the consumers are able to benefit and utilize data and utilize intelligence and utilize transactional efficiencies that we're really trying to do that as well.
Yeah, I like to reference best in class. I mean, benchmarking is something that the real estate sector is comfortable with. But at the moment, there isn't a good benchmarking system other than capital in and capital out. So yeah. In terms of, comparison with some of the jurisdictions that you're looking at, where does the UK sit? I won't ask you about Ireland. I know you're not operating here yet. But in terms of the UK, where does the industry sit in terms of adoption and use of data?
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, to me, it's about codifying it with titles. So just a few years ago, the title Chief Innovation Officer at companies was very new. Now it's standard. Every large enterprise has hired two CIOs, right? The head of innovation and the head of information. Sometimes that's the same role, sometimes it's separate. What's even newer is the idea of a chief data officer, CDO. And that the largest companies are just starting to do that. Once that happens, once you have that role, that title, budget comes with it. And then a team comes with it. And then there's this just understanding that the momentum is not to be stopped and starting to spend. And I've found that many large companies in the UK, both that own real estate and that even just occupy real estate, are filling these roles. And that's a really, really good sign.
Yeah. Okay. Final notes for people listening in who want to explore Navigator a little bit more. What's the most important thing they need to take away?
I think that it's that data is empowering and giving yourself a utility to really understand it and absorb it and utilize it in your day-to-day business. You should be able to drive revenue, drive portfolio performance, drive occupancy. Our engine is designed to make you money and ultimately make your team more efficient. And that's really where the return on speed comes into play, is how fast can we get you from that 0 to 1? And how fast can we grow your business?
I particularly like your use of the term enlightenment, because it does feel like we're coming into an age of enlightenment across the built environment. And that's exciting to watch. Thank you, Taylor and Kevin, for taking us through Navigator CRE offering. It's great to hear about, and we'll explore more, and we look forward to your expansion outside of the UK. So that's it from us this week. Thank you for listening in to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Also, my thanks to Peter Rice on sound. We're back at the same time next week. For myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, stay safe.